The NBA playoffs are an exciting time for NBA fans, and there's 6 great teams left, so I'm going to talk about each one of them for a minute. Starting off with the Boston Celtics. They've looked good to start the playoffs, but I just don't think that's the competition you'd want to have played. Yes, they won both series in 5 games, one against Miami without Jimmy Butler and one against Cleveland. I don't think that's the competition you prove yourself in, and it's been an easy run. And will they be prepared when they play New York or Indiana? And that's the question, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. Are they prepared to play that team that will challenge them in the series? And I think they definitely have the firepower, but they have had a lack of consistency in the playoffs. The loss to Miami, well, they didn't perform too well, but you can't really be mad. They made 23 threes. That's not going to happen every game. The game against Cleveland, you need to be more prepared for that. You got destroyed in the second half. You can't be having that in a playoffs against a team you're much better than. And I still think there's problems with this team, but if they're at their best, they are favourites for the title. Next, you have Denver. They've had some really ugly games this playoff series, losing to Minnesota by 40 in Game 6. You don't do that in a Game 6 as a finals contender. You need to be on your game, and that was a game where they could have closed it out. They struggled in Game 1 and 2 against the Minnesota Timberwolves. That was already bad enough. You win 3 games in a row, you looked good, and you looked like you were going to move on in 6, and then you lose by 40. They're going to have to win this Game 7, and they're going to need to have a consistent Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., and Jamal Murray. And especially Jamal Murray, I'm not sure if that's happening. He's been wildly inconsistent in the playoffs, the exact opposite of what he was in the finals last year. The main reason they won it last year was, yes, Jokic, but Jamal Murray was an amazingly large part of that playoff run. And will it happen if he's being wildly inconsistent? I don't think so. Are they still one of the favourite teams to win it? Yes, but if he's going to do those games in the conference finals and the finals, I'm not sure if they can win it again. Next, I have Dallas. They just won their series against Oklahoma City, closing out the series in 6. They're looking like a good team, but are they good enough to beat Denver or Minnesota? And the short answer for me is no. Luka's been good, but he hasn't been the Luka magic we saw last time he was in the playoffs. And to beat a team like that, he's going to need the best production of his life. And right now, he's been off his game. They did win Game 6, but he had like 8 turnovers. You can't be doing that in a closeout game. They could have been set to 7 in Oklahoma, and that's when it gets risky. And if he puts up those games, they're losing against Minnesota or Denver. But if he does the production we need, he leads his team the best he can, I think they could do it. If he is the best player on that court at the time, I think they have a chance. But he needs to prove himself first. Next, I have New York Knicks. They have to close out Game 7 against Indiana, and I think this series went further than they thought. They need to close out this series. They're definitely the better team, and they need to prove that. Jalen Brunson has to have a big game, end the series, and then you're moving on against Boston, which is a tough opponent. And since Josh Hart went down with an injury in Game 6, you're going to need him for that series. And if he's not back, there's going to be some trouble in New York. It's already going to be a tough series alone. Missing one of your best players could be fatal for this team's season. If he's back, I think they have a chance. Boston hasn't been able to prove themselves against a good opponent, so I think they could not be ready. And if the Knicks could steal Game 1 or 2, that could be big for them. They've still got one of the best point guards in the world with Jalen Brunson, a great supporting cast with Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Isaiah Hartenstein. They've got the team to do it. They've just got to prove themselves against a really good team in the Boston Celtics. Next, I have Minnesota. They've gone really far in this playoffs. Anthony Edwards has proved that he's one of the best players in the world. Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, Mike Conley have been an amazing supporting cast in this playoffs. And when they're going, they're winning their games. They lost 3 games in a row to Denver and going to have to close it out here in the playoffs. Game 7 against them, and I think they could 100% do it. This is going to be a hell of a game. Anthony Edwards has to perform at his best to win Game 7 here. I think it could go either way, but if they do make it through, I think they could be favourites. Coming up against Dallas, I think they will win that series if it happens. And then you've got Boston or New York. I think they could 100% win the championship this year if Anthony Edwards is consistent, which we have seen problems with. This team was inconsistent. Although Jokic is good, you have to shut him down, and letting him drop 40 is not a way you win the series. I know it's easier said than done, but if they prove that they're the best defensive team left in the playoffs, I think they could easily win the chip this year. And finally, I have Indiana. They're a great team, they're fun to watch, and they've got some of the best players in the league. You've got Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, and they can win any game they want. But they have been wildly inconsistent in the playoffs so far. Some games they lose to a team they should be beating. The Bucks were injured, and they got the win. They were majorly injured, and they won easily. You need to prove that you're a consistent team, and then I definitely think Indiana have a chance. Closing out the Game 7 here is what you need to do. If they're at their best, I think they could easily win against New York. If they're at their worst and they're not consistent and they're a bit nervous going into this game, I think they could lose by 30. If they're at their best, they're great. If they're at their worst, which is happening a bit too much in the playoffs, they've got some problems. And that's all I have for you today. So thanks for watching the video. Tell me who you think's going to win the NBA championship in the comment down below, and have a nice day.